Oh man, this looks kind of cool on YouTube. Cool. All right. All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome back to Middle Tech's Friday update. We're trying a little something new this morning. We're going to go live on YouTube simultaneously while going live on Instagram as well. So if YouTube is your preferred way to watch the Friday update, you can now see it there as well. So if anybody's watching us on YouTube right now, welcome to our first YouTube live stream. So let's get Nate and Evan in here and we'll get started. Let's see, we got Nate joining. And then we got a good This Week in Tech History, so excited to tell you guys what we got going on. Good morning, Nate.
What's up? Good morning.
I was telling the audience we're now live on YouTube as well. A little bit more legit.
Multi-platform.
It's been a long time coming.
Big. We're doing a lot more video for all of our shows, so YouTube is definitely going to become more of a focus across everything that we do, which is exciting.
Yeah, which is also a pretty big lift. Like getting
Oh,
getting
yeah.
video on getting video on everything is a lot more process added into everything. All right,
Yeah.
let's get Evan added in here, and we'll be all set. All right, look at us. God,
There
we
he is.
figured it out this morning. Everyone's video looks nice and clear too. This is rare.
Don't jinx it.
Well, let's start with This Week in Tech History before diving into our sponsors. I was kind of excited to go over this one.
Yeah.
Today actually, in 1880, Wabash, Indiana becomes the first city in the world to be completely illuminated by electric light, which I think is pretty cool. So not that long ago, we were in the dark, and here we are chatting live on Instagram and YouTube.
What
Come a
city
long
was
way.
that? Wabash, Indiana?
Wabash, Indiana.
I'd
We
love
should
to
go
know what
visit.
they did wrong to not be a big city.
Yeah, for real. You'd think that'd be a huge head start.
Or it was like a
Indiana,
pilot
so
for
they're not good at
for
anything.
electricity. They're like, this is a small little town. Let's just throw them some lights, see how they handle it, and then we can go to New York City and put it there.
Well, Nate, why don't you cover the sponsors for this Friday update real quick?
Yeah, again, thank you to our sponsors for supporting our content. We got two sponsors this morning, Kentucky Innovation and Bolt Marketing. Kentucky Innovation is the state's innovation hub. They have a lot of great programs for both founders and investors. Anybody looking to invest in startups or create a startup or anything in the technology or innovation space, check them out, KY Innovation. And then Bolt Marketing, based in Lexington, they have a lot of great marketing services, specifically tailored for startups to help you get your mind off of marketing so you can grow your business. And they just launched our website. So we're going to be doing a little bit more formal promotion of that next week. But middletech.com, go check it out, powered by Bolt Marketing. It's some good stuff.
Man, how legit, middletech.com. No longer
Yeah.
middletechpod.com.
It feels good to say just straight up middletech.com.
We're proud of that one. Cool. Well, we got some good stories to cover today. First of which is this Defense Production Act that Biden just initiated for batteries. So in response to rising gas prices, rising oil prices here in the U.S. due to Russia invading Ukraine, Biden's making a push to ramp up battery production. So Evan, give us a summary of what's going on here and why we should care.
Yeah, I mean, this is a pretty big deal. So the thing to pay attention to is that this was done through the Defense Production Act, which essentially allows a government to prioritize certain resources and allow private companies to prioritize those resources as well. And they're allocating these resources to strategic initiatives, like for instance, right now, gas prices. We need to increase the supply of gas in the United States. One other way of helping with the shortage of oil is to prioritize electric cars as well. So if we prioritize electric cars, then there's less need for gas. Then people can have means of transportation. I'm a little confused on the timeline here because it takes a long time to like ramp up battery production and ramp up electric vehicle production. So I don't know if Biden thinks that the oil thing is not going away anytime soon, and Russia's just not going to be a good participant in the global market. So I'm a little confused about that, but I think this is a really big deal that the government's now stepping up and doing something like this. Um, the thing that I'm paying most attention to is the raw materials that the government is trying to hoard around batteries. So things like lithium, nickel, cobalt, these are all very rare and expensive to mine. And so around the world, people are fighting for these resources. And so it's going to be interesting to see, how the U.S. Competes for these resources and hoards them, and then what they do with them.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing here and what makes the timeline make a little bit more sense to me is just energy independence. I think we've realized, and we've had much less of an impact here than Europe has, but we've realized, being so reliant on other countries, especially other countries that may not be 100% allies, is a huge national security risk when we need their energy. So the shorter term things that he's doing with their strategic reserves of oil and whatnot, obviously that's more of like a patchwork. Let's fix this now. But starting to really focus on how we can create the future of electric energy in the country, I think is just one step towards trying to be more energy independent, which is very needed.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
the
think
world,
this is. Yeah, go ahead, Evan.
the world is switching to renewable energy, and there's going to be a race towards that. So
Hmm.
the most powerful country in the world typically um, is very closely tied to control over energy and having the currency that energy is traded in. And right now, China's beating us in the renewable energy race. And if the world were to switch to renewable energy, China would just have one more reason that they might be the most powerful country in the world if you take away, who has the biggest military. I don't think anybody's ever going to catch up to us there, but in other aspects of what makes somebody powerful, energy is typically at the top of the list. And as of right now, we're falling behind China.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is just an opportunistic uh, act in order to, kind of try and get ramped up production for batteries and for the renewable energy stuff. But like you said, Evan, this is not something they're gonna put this into effect, and then here in a month we're gonna have, more batteries out there and a little bit more
Everyone will be in a
efficient.
Tesla.
Yeah, everyone will be in a Tesla. It's something that I look at that as like the future of energy independence, but this is something that's going to be more of a, multi-year, probably 5-year play before this actually really starts affecting the energy that we consume in the U.S. But I mean, it makes me happy to see that this is one of the strategic ways that that we're, going about trying to get to energy independence. But let's move on to this next story, and that is around the unionization of Amazon. So, Nate, do you want to give us a quick summary of this story and what's going on over at Amazon?
Yeah, so there's been another vote at the Amazon Fulfillment Center in Bessemer, Alabama. They're currently undergoing a vote on if they want to unionize the fulfillment workers there at the plant. And the votes is still ongoing. There's a bunch of contested ballots. There's a bunch of ballots that have been voided. So that will take some time. But I think zooming out, it's the story of the Amazon unionization. This Bessemer, Alabama plant had a vote last year as well that failed. And there's also currently another big plant on Staten Island in New York that is undergoing a vote right now that has had like a year-long campaign as well. Obviously, Amazon is against the unionization of its workers. They claim that the unions might not have the individual workers, um, you know, best interest in mind. Workers will have to pay dues to the union, and that will take away from what their take-home pay is. All of that is what Amazon claims. The union claims that because there's no union, Amazon acts unilaterally and makes decisions that benefit the company operations over the individual workers. So interesting thing there. Amazon has invested millions and millions of dollars across the country to fight unionization because if one domino falls at one center, they think it'll happen everywhere, and that will have a massive impact on their business.
Yeah, from the perspective of the workers and from the unions, you hear stories of having just ridiculous quotas as a worker for packaging items with no time for bathroom breaks. If some workers say if you want to go to the bathroom, you're not going to be able to, you'll miss your quota. So it's things like that that you're hearing come out of some of these warehouses that are concerning. But obviously, it's not bad enough if none of the votes in other cities are passing. They're getting closer and closer, so it might be getting more awareness out there. That might be part of the problem, is just these workers speaking up. But you start to hear the stories like that, then you wonder if unions are the best thing. But obviously, you know, it would halt Amazon's ability to innovate. So that's a concern. If I'm in Amazon's shoes, I absolutely wouldn't want them to unionize. I'd want to do everything I could to take care of them while also making sure we're prioritizing growth and innovation. So it's a tricky subject.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's move on to this next story. I just want to kind of keep an eye on that Amazon thing. That might be something we touch on again in the future as they keep on having these votes and kind of inch towards unionization. We'll
Yeah.
keep all of our listeners
Starbucks
updated.
is an interesting model to see how kind of one domino could fall and then everything changes. That happened at Starbucks. So
Really? So did they start with the unionization and then it just like kind of swept throughout the entire organization?
yeah, I think it literally was one store, or it might have been like one neighborhood in a city voted to unionize, and then it's now pretty much all the locations, or it's
Yeah.
becoming that.
Yeah. Well, we'll keep an eye on that. I think that's something that could turn into a huge story that is kind of forming in a couple of their markets right now. So let's talk about some Bitcoin being stolen. We always like to kind of cover any of the big hacks that are going on in the space. Evan, what's this latest Bitcoin hack that we're talking about here?
Yeah, there's a popular video game, and that video game is called Axie Infinity, and you can earn Bitcoin throughout the game. You kind of like raise these creatures, and you can create networks within this game, and earn Bitcoin. Well, that Bitcoin was hacked, essentially, or the network was hacked, and Bitcoin was stolen. This is the largest hack in the history of decentralized finance, so DeFi. So this is a big deal. This was $615 million. So just over half a billion dollars was taken here. So the hackers use fake keys to forge these fake withdrawals. The network is very complicated. I'm not going to explain how Ethereum is used and how bridge assets and stable coins are used to move money around. DeFi is kind of complicated. If you're not in the weeds, then it's not probably worth talking about on this podcast. But it's a complicated concept, and hackers were able to get into that and exploit it. And this is the biggest DeFi hack in history.
Does this kind of stuff shake your all's confidence on crypto when you see massive hacks like this going on? Or is it just something that you can kind of write off as we're early in the space and it's something to be expected with the level of innovation and the pace that the space is moving?
I'm kind of in between on those two things. Like, one, I think if you understand, how blockchain works and these side chains and networks like Axie Infinity, you can kind of like rationalize it in your mind where this doesn't really say much about, the future of crypto in and of itself. But I don't think the average person who's trying to invest their money thinks of it that way. I think they see, 600 million stolen. I'm never going to buy Bitcoin. And it
Right.
just kind of, it sets back the brand of decentralized finance a little bit, which every time something like this happens, I think takes time to overcome.
Yeah. I mean, for me, anytime I see that, this is like that argument where you get something stolen on the traditional finance markets and you've got a place like a bank to go and kind of sort it out. But whenever it's crypto, you're on your own. And that's makes it
Yeah.
especially painful when it's your money that you're losing through something that has been heralded as being more secure and more in control for the end user. So, yeah, to be honest, it always kind of shakes my confidence
Oh, yeah.
in crypto. But I think it's something that just kind of needs to be talked about each time it happens and try to figure out why it happened. And then, I do think part of it is just we're really early in the space and not all the correct protocols have been put in place to protect consumers, or the consumers that are using it are still early in the space. They're early adopters. They might not know exactly how to protect themselves either.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I think it comes down to the SEC as well. I think it's early days, and I think that's the way I want to look at it as a technologist, is that it's early days in crypto and blockchain technologies. But if consumers are ever going to be protected, the government's going to have to step in.
Right.
It's proven that private companies won't do it themselves. If they're strictly driven by profits, then people are going to be taken advantage of, uh, and the government, aka the SEC, is going to have to step in and regulate these stable coins and other aspects of the crypto environment and blockchain environment, and make sure that they're using the standard that banks were built on as far as security goes. The underlying technology doesn't have to be the same as banks, but as far as knowing your customer and all of the other ways that banks authenticate that people are actually real and actually have real funds and have identities that they can track, that SEC entity needs to step in and begin to move faster. They're moving too slow right now.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
kind of go ahead, Nate.
I was just saying, if you take that thought experiment, though, like, at what point is it no longer decentralized? If there's KYC regulations, if it's insured by the government in some way, like, it's like a decentralized network underlying a fully centralized and protected network, like, and
Well, here's
it'd
the
be
thing
tough.
that Bitcoin optimists or Bitcoin
Maximalist.
maximalists and people that think that crypto is just the next big thing need to be brought down to earth and realize that there will never be mass adoption unless governments around the world figure out how to collaborate with it. It's just not going to be a thing, in my opinion. I do think that Bitcoin can exist as like an asset, like gold. But if people want Bitcoin to be in the fabric of our everyday lives, the government will have to be deeply entwined with that, and people just gonna have to get over the fact that that is a possibility if they want it to become mainstream. Banks are required to make it mainstream. You have to use a bank in order to buy a Bitcoin. And so it's like these things just need to be understood. And the maximalists need to kind of take a step back and say, if we really want this to grow as big as it is, let's figure out how to get the government involved while somehow figuring out, how to maintain decentralization. The on-ramps and things can be better.
Yep, for sure. Well, speaking of traditional finance and kind of tying that in with decentralization with crypto, let's talk about this Goldman Sachs executing the first over-the-counter crypto trade. Evan, give us a quick summary of what's going on with that.
Yeah, not too much to talk about here. It's kind of just a headline topic, but essentially, over-the-counter trades are done outside of the NYSE, New York Stock Exchange, and Nasdaq. So essentially, what they're allowing here is Bitcoin to be traded, except the Bitcoin never touches Goldman Sachs' balance sheet. The only thing that happens is that after the trade is made, cash is then transferred. So it's done outside of the balance sheet of Goldman Sachs. But that is just a sign that it's still early days. And eventually, what people are saying is that this is a big deal just in the fact that Goldman Sachs is allowing this to take place. It's taking place within a technology called Galaxy Digital. But the reason this is a big deal is because if Goldman Sachs begins to move more in this direction and actually allow trading, even though it's OTC and they're not taking it on their own balance sheet, it's still a big deal, and it opens up the door for other Bitcoin-like Bitcoin trading activity and other ways to package Bitcoin into investment vehicles, and then Goldman Sachs can sell those to their clients. So this is just kind of like a toe in the water.
Yeah, I think this is an important one. Just having kind of going back to the brand, like the brand of Bitcoin, even though nobody really is in control of that brand, there's still very much a public perception and a brand that goes along with Bitcoin. This is a big step for the Bitcoin brand, just because having a big name, a big trusted name like Goldman Sachs, that goes a long way. Kind of with what we were talking about around trust and around putting it into the mainstream and getting the right people's attention around it.
This is what I was getting at earlier. One big thing here is liquidity. When you get these big, massive banks trading in this and creating a market and an asset, it creates liquidity for not only the bank and Bitcoin, but for everybody. So the more liquidity, the healthier a market. And so stuff like this is essential. And again, it will never go mainstream without banks and without the government. So this is, again, like another step that if people want Bitcoin to go mainstream, the banks are going to have to step in and start putting it on their balance sheet, allowing their clients to trade in, allow more liquidity. And the government's going to have to say, okay, well, let's start to figure out ways to regulate this and create safer on-ramps for people to go in and out of this asset. Because as of right now, when you've got third parties building layers above the actual Bitcoin network that are not as secure as the actual Bitcoin network, then that creates problems for consumers that might not know they're not on the actual Bitcoin network. Maybe they're on something like a Lightning or one like it that is, layer 2 or layer 3.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but if you're invested in the Goldman Sachs fund that bought Bitcoin, let's say, isn't that the same thing? You're a layer above the actual blockchain.
Yeah, but it's through a trusted entity that the government regulates.
Okay. Would something like Coinbase not be a trusted entity?
It's regulated. Yeah, so everything
Are you
about
saying it would?
so KYC and things take place.
Yeah.
So know your customer and things like that take
Yeah.
place within Coinbase. It's a publicly traded company, so it's totally regulated. What I'm talking about is a lot of DeFi is not regulated because it's outside the bounds of banks and the government. It's done on Ethereum and layers above the actual Ethereum network, and so there is no regulation for DeFi networks like what we're talking about earlier, where the hack took place.
I'd like to have a whole podcast where we talk about how decentralization fits in with regulation and what needs to happen for some of these cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin to kind of go mainstream and how we can protect the consumer at the same time. Because for me, I think of it as just like, yeah, the government's going to have a role, but at the same time, the core principle of Bitcoin, where no more can be created, is still an attractive value proposition when it comes to the government collaborating with it. Because right now, the government has control over the monetary supply. If you decide that you want to use a currency that they don't have as much control over, they might still be able to regulate it, but they'll never be able to issue more Bitcoin, which is, I think, an interesting dynamic that I'd like to kind of just dive more into in maybe a future podcast and kind of explore how regulation fits in with decentralization. Because, like Evan said, I don't think anything's going mainstream. I don't think there'll be mass adoption until those types of things are in place. So anyway, just interesting stuff around crypto to kind of keep following with it. I think this is a huge linchpin in terms of mass adoption. So that kind of wraps up our discussion there. Evan, did you want to touch on anything going on with Meta? I saw that you replied to Brandon's comment there, so I wanted to give you a
Yeah,
second to do that.
there's still not enough information known for I think us to cover it in too much detail. But essentially, there was a big hack. It's kind of scary because the hackers
heard
actually
about this.
acted like they were government officials requesting an emergency data request, which means that the government can ask people like Snapchat, Facebook, and Apple for an emergency data request in order for them to hand over customer information, high level customer information in this case, so like names of subscribers. And those hackers got full lists of people's information, thinking Apple and Facebook thought that they were the government, but it was hackers acting as the government. They actually hacked into government emails in order to get this information. So it's pretty scary stuff. There's still not a whole lot of details out about the type of data that was stolen. It seems like it was just high level data, but it's kind of scary. They forged these legal requests and sent them to Apple and Facebook and got that information.
It was users, I'm pretty sure it was users' addresses, phone numbers, and IP addresses. I read an article about that. I about sent it to be discussed today, but I'm with you. I don't know if there's enough information out about it. But yeah, that's. Could you imagine being the employee that was the one that got the official notification that oh shoot, the government's requesting this from us, and it turns out it's a huge scam? I mean, that's just awful.
Well, it's also interesting that you always thought that Apple just never handed over user information. Like when the San Bernardino shooting happened, things of that nature, they never handed over information on their customers.
That's a good point.
And now that a hack happens, they have to report that. And now that hack happens to be a person acting like a government, they're just kind of caught in this weird spot where it's like, okay, so you do give information to the government when they request it. Before you weren't. And the only reason we figured out is because now of a hack. So, that's an interesting perspective that I was thinking of when I saw this. I think it was last week when this first came out, or early this week.
Yeah, their whole brand of we don't cooperate with anybody when it comes to our customer data, I think was kind of hurt last year with the child endangerment image scanning story. And then if this has been going on in the background the whole time, that's just a whole nother level.
Are you talking about Apple or Facebook?
Apple specifically.
Yeah.
Their whole brand was we literally never share any information.
Right. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I mean, we'll see what this means long term for Apple and security. I think all those reports from Eric Snowden and such on NSA, and what we know is going on in China our biggest competitor as far as how they share data with between private companies and the government.
And our
I don't
data.
think it's really a surprise that our government's going to have to monitor us closely and have the direct pipelines into Apple and Facebook. I think I would be no longer surprised if nothing came from Edward Snowden and that leak of information. I think the government is just going to continue to do what they want in order to stay in power. As citizens, I think we need to ask the question of what's more important, national security or our privacy. That's gonna be a whole bigger debate as time goes on and China gets more powerful.
That's a whole podcast in itself. Another great topic to discuss and to debate.
Yeah.
But we're running out of time here on this Friday update, so we'll go ahead and wrap things up here. Nate, tell us what kind of weekend thoughts we have coming out tomorrow.
Weekend Thoughts tomorrow was inspired by one of the subjects we covered, I think, last week on the Friday update, the Amazon purchase of Metro Goldwyn Mayer, and kind of thinking about how Amazon innovates in literally every industry that they go into. And so media is going to be no different. What is beyond streaming? What can they do with this IP that they have, in formats that we're not even thinking of yet? So
Very
that'll
cool.
be a good one to listen to.
And then on Monday, we have an episode coming out with Jane Mossbacker Morris of To the Market. So that was an awesome episode that Evan and I sat down to record a couple weeks ago. Jane is doing some awesome work in terms of sustainability of supply chains. So they're helping huge retail companies source their materials and their products in a sustainable way and kind of supporting, Evan, how would you say, underrepresented?
Underrepresented small businesses around the world that are using sustainable practices in their creation and sourcing of materials.
Yeah. So Jane is kicking ass over at To the Market. We're excited to release that episode on Monday. Other than that, anything else that we need to go over before hopping off?
I don't think so.
Awesome. Well, everyone have a great Friday. We'll see you next week.
See you guys.